They came because rumors never stay buried in Chicago. A decommissioned county morgue squatted beside the river like a block of forgotten winter. Years ago, someone said a ring of thieves harvested organs here after midnight, turning the dead into ledgers. 5 curious strangers, Maya, Theo, Luis, Naomi, and Grace, decided rumors deserved proof. Maya carried the camera. She'd shot urban legends before, always hoping the city would blink and show its second set of eyes. Theo held a crowbar just in case, though he said it like a joke. Luis, a hobbyist with too many lock-picking forums in his search history, had the keys nobody issued. Naomi came because she was a med student, and because the word morgue made her mouth taste like copper. Grace brought the audio rig. She freelanced as a sound designer, trading in drama's invisible twin. The wind scraped the chain-link fence with a dry hiss. Somewhere along the river, a barge moaned a low animal note that slid across the water and pressed its face to the building's brick. Grace lifted a mic instinctively. "Room tone is wild," she whispered. The tiny recorder gave a soft red blink. Inside, the air was a taxidermy of winter. The hallway floors shone with a waxed fatigue. Every line of fluorescent light wore a halo of dead flies. The fixtures buzzed like trapped bees. Naomi hugged herself. "This used to be public service," she said. "Death with paperwork." They found the admitting desk, a laminate island petrified mid-shift. Clipboards slept in a stack. When Luis slid one aside, it rasped a papery drag that raised shivers up Grace's arms. He pointed at a scratched-in note near the edge, 2, 13 drawer, 14 return. Maya framed the shot. "We stick to the plan," she said. "Intro in the corridor. We move to cold storage, we find drawer 14, we get B-roll, and we leave. Minimal contact, no heroic." From deeper in the building came a hollow clank, metal greeting metal, a tired hello. Theo raised his brows theatrically. "Minimal contact," he echoed. The clank answered itself a second time like a cough that remembered it had seen witnesses. Grace cupped her headphones. There's a low band hum under everything she said, like a machine that forgot it was shut off. Naomi glanced at the nearest outlet. No power light. Residual charge, she guessed, but even she didn't believe it. Cold storage was a pair of double doors, with porthole windows round and milky. The handles wore the polished scars of routine, countless hands, countless shifts. When Theo pulled the hinges, let out a brittle squeal, an icicle snapping in the throat of the room. Frost licked the seams of the inner wall where the steel drawers nested like hive cells. "This is not trespassing." Luis said it's urban anthropology. He tried to smile. It didn't arrive. They spread Maya composing wide shots. Naomi scanning labels yellowed to tea. Theo testing the floor's patience with his boots. Grace placing a small Omni mic on the central prep table. Rolling, Maya said. Her camera clicked into a soft purr, the lens cap whispering against its strap. She nodded to Grace, who gave a thumbs up as waveforms began to stroll across her handheld screen. "Listen," Grace said suddenly. "Do you hear that?" They paused. The room breathed. A faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tap wandered through the steel like a fingernail walking down a hallway. It wasn't steady. It skipped a beat, came back embarrassed, then continued with private urgency. Naomi found drawer numbers. 12, 13. When her gloved finger brushed, 14. The steel responded with a tiny ting, a silver bell swallowed by cotton. She looked at the others. "Return," she said. 2, 13. Something else joined the tapping, a distant wheeze, soft and thin like air being persuaded through a straw. Grace's mics sharpened their attention, and the waveform grew a new spine. "Could be a vent," Theo said, and his voice sounded like he'd borrowed confidence from a pawn shop. "Don't open it yet," Maya said. She arranged the shot with careful superstition. B-roll of drawer handles, the table with a trough, the drain. The camera's autofocus hunted with tiny mechanical chirps. The ceiling lights hummed a lonely note, as if the room had a favorite song it couldn't remember the words to. "Okay," Maya said at last. "On 3, we slide film document close." She kept the lens trained. 1. From the hallway behind them, something clicked, one crisp footstep on tile. Then stillness, as if the building remembered how to be empty. Theo turned his head and didn't move again for 2 heartbeats. 2, Maya said, stronger. No one corrected her. Luis took the handle with both hands. Naomi hovered ready to read what the room forgot to bury. Grace kept one ear cup off the other, clamped to her skull. 3, Maya breathed, and the rails sang a short metallic shiver as the drawer slid. They expected a body bag's mute posture. They expected a toe tag, like a name on a doorbell. But the drawer was empty, cleared, polished, waiting. A single hospital bracelet lay coiled like punctuation, the printed name "long ago" humidified into a smear. Behind the empty drawer, in the mouth of its cavity, the tapping resumed closer, now brighter, like knuckles kissing sheet metal from one room farther than existence. Naomi swallowed. "There's space behind this one," she said. Sometimes they piggyback drawers for overflow makeshift expansion. A dull thud answered her, as if the building disliked being explained. Grace adjusted her levels. "There's a voice under the noise," she said, her brow tightening. Not words, just pressure. Like a hallway learning to speak. "Let's not romanticize," Theo began and stopped, when his breath made a cloud that shouldn't have been there. Even with the cold units deceased, the air dropped a degree that lifted the hair along his wrists. Maya, keeping the shot steady, caught movement at the edge of the frame. A second drawer quivered, then stilled. 14's neighbor 15 twitched like a sleeper answering a dream. A faint rattle traveled through the bank of steel, an insect scuttling behind enamel. "Cut it," Theo said. "We have what we need." He took a step toward the doors. They answered with a soft slam, not shut, not open, but a statement wood meeting rubber, with a padded thump that sounded like a palm pressed briefly over a mouth. "We stick to the plan," Maya said again, but her voice had found a thinner register. She tilted the camera into the cavity of drawer 14. The empty space held its breath. Somewhere below a compressor coughed a ghost of a machine trying to remember its job, and then lapsed into a whisper that dragged along the tiles. "Guys," Luis said. He had moved toward the far end where a strip of frost had colonized the wall. The frost's edge drew a shape that could be mistaken for a handprint if the viewer arrived eager enough. As he reached out, the steel answered with a skittering ting-ting-ting like pennies tossed down a well. "Don't touch," Naomi said. "Just don't." Her voice trembled, an honest instrument. Grace, hearing the tremor, raised her mic. The tremor recorded itself as a fine, high ribbon of sound tight enough to pluck. They were 5 curious strangers, until a door made introductions. The inner freezer door, an older, heavier thing with a submarine latch, waited at the back of the room. It wore a painted sign, "Always Prop." The prop, a wooden wedge, rested poor and forgotten on the floor. Without warning, the latch clicked, a crisp, undeniable click, the kind that divorced coincidence from explanation. Air pressed past them with a cold sigh, a winter exhalation that tasted of swallowed silver. The door drifted inward and settled to near closed, not a slam. More like the gesture a librarian makes when a book isn't done yet. Theo lunged and caught it with his shoulder. "It's fine," he said as if talk could be scaffolding. He looked over his back. Maya, a hand. Maya passed the camera to Grace, whose instinct had always been to catch falling things. As Grace took the weight, the camera's onboard mic recorded a low, steady rumble, her own heartbeat rising into the diaphragm. A private drum lay from behind drawer 14, a slow scrape began long, patient, something learning to live. The scrape paused, then answered itself with a softer echo, a rehearsed call and response. The lights did not flicker. That would have been kindness, would have announced its intentions. Instead, the room simply grew smaller by a thought. Naomi looked at the painted sign at the wedge that had failed its one job. The wedge nudged itself a fraction across the floor with a dry scritch, as if a foot had brushed it. Naomi's eyes widened. She hadn't moved. "Okay," Maya said, regaining the camera. "We're leaving this room." She pivoted toward the double doors. They did not argue. Theo, still bracing the inner latch, stepped away. The latch turned on its own, slowly, courteously, as if tasting a memory. The door sighed to rest, not fully shut, but shut enough to be a promise. Luis, who had gravitated back to drawer 14, as if it could bless him with an explanation, leaned in. "Return," he read again, from the clipboard note earlier. "Return what?" The reply came from inside the empty drawer, a brittle clink like glass, chattering in a winter truck, and a whisper that may have been the building's tongue against the word heart. He jerked back. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," Grace said. And in her headphones, the whisper repeated a shade quieter, as if ashamed of being caught. Luis laughed once, a coin tossed to luck. "I'm going to prove it's pipes," he said, finding a bravado he hadn't filed a permit for. He slid the drawer out farther, then reached into the cavity, feeling for a seam. Luis, Naomi warned. Before anyone else could speak, the rails gave a sudden metallic chatter, sharp, percussive staccato, a burst that sounded like teeth applauding. The chatter ran down the bank of drawers like a fuse racing through logs. Luis flinched. His hand slipped deeper into cold. "Back out," Theo snapped. He grabbed Luis's shoulder. From the cavity, a thin, high whine rose ice over metal air, over edge clean and keening, and horribly pleased to exist. Luis froze. "It's colder," said, squinting. His breath stained the air heavier than before. Naomi stepped closer. She saw at first the faintest glitter, a rime assembling around Luis's wrist, sketching bracelets in frost. "Luis," she said, "that's enough." A final sound decided for them, a deep, resonant thump within the wall, as if a hidden heart had remembered its beat once, just once. The steel drawer jumped in its track with a quick, hungry rattle. Theo yanked Luis back with both hands. The drawer didn't like losing what it had begun to claim. It slammed. Not with violence, but with precision, a measured, inevitable closing that accepted no witnesses. Luis's sleeve tore a scream of fabric, and he stumbled into Naomi's arms. He looked at his wrist. No blood, no mark, but whiteness, a ring of evaporating frost. "Let's go," he said, and for the first time, nobody argued. They reached the double doors. Somewhere in the building, a distant elevator bell chimed a single antique ding that promised a floor no longer listed. Maya turned for one last shot. Drawer 14 sat folded shut, expressionless. Behind the camera, a slow, deliberate knock sounded from inside the steel. 1, 2, 3. Not loud, confident. The room waited. The building waited. And under all of it, The faintest chorus of metallic breath, an orchestra of tiny patient inhales gathered behind the walls. They left the room, but the freezer door's latch followed them like a thought. They barely had time to process what had happened to Luis's wrist. The group pushed back into the corridor, the double doors whispering shut behind them, as if the morgue itself approved of their retreat. The corridor groaned, pipes expanding with a hollow boom that rolled above their heads like distant thunder. Naomi flinched, her med student logic failing against the noise. Grace kept recording, shaking. In her headphones, the boom stretched into a low animal growl, the kind of sound a building should not know how to make. Theo led the way. Crowbar raised his confidence, fraying. "We just need one more shot," Maya insisted, her camera trembling in her grip. The freezer door, the hallway, then. "We're gone." No one believed the word gone. They turned a corner into another chamber smaller than the first. A single gurney stood in the middle, its vinyl surface cracked like dried skin. The wheels gave a tiny squeal as the air shifted, though no one touched it. Naomi pressed her palm to her chest. "It feels heavy," she said, and her own heartbeat drummed so loud it seemed borrowed by the room. Grace set her mic closer. Through the headphones came a steady thump, 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 not from Naomi's body, but from under the gurney itself. It mimicked a pulse, wet and deliberate, growing louder until the whole room seemed to breathe in rhythm. Luis backed toward the wall. "Nope, not ours. That's not ours." Theo lifted the crowbar, as if steel could argue with the unseen. Maya focused the lens on the gurney, her breath fogging the screen. The pulse rose, a cavernous beat, like a gigantic heart echoing inside the walls. Each thud made the ceiling lights tremble with a faint buzz. Naomi stepped closer, torn between fear and fascination. "It's following a real cardiac rhythm," she whispered. "That's impossible." Then the gurney moved. Not rolled, not shoved, moved, deliberate, aligning itself in the center of the room. The sound shifted, a sharp metallic scrape, like scalpels dragged across a tray. Grace covered her ears. Her recorder still caught the screech, a scream of instruments forgotten, but not forgiven. Theo shouted back. He grabbed Naomi's arm, but she resisted, eyes locked on the gurney. A shape began to rise on its surface, indentations, pressing up from below like invisible hands carving from the inside out. The vinyl tore with a sickening rip, a sound too wet, too alive, spilling into the air. Naomi gasped. "It wants..." She started, but the sentence ended in a scream. A high slicing hiss entered the chamber, sharp as steel parting air. She clutched her chest. Her body jerked forward as if invisible strings yanked her down. Theo and Luis lunged, but Maya's camera caught the truth. Naomi's chest convulsed, once then stilled. Her eyes went glassy, mouth open in a silent question. The room exhaled a long, victorious sigh, metallic and final. Grace trembled, lowering her mic. "It took her heart," she whispered. No one dared confirm. But they all knew the pulse had stopped. They left Naomi's body on the gurney because there was no other choice. No one could even bring themselves to close her eyes. The silence that followed her collapse was worse than the sound of the pulse, because silence in a morgue meant permission. Maya gripped her camera tighter, pointing it down to avoid filming Naomi's stillness. Grace shook so badly, the waveform on her recorder wobbled with static. The recorder picked up a low murmur in the walls, like voices whispering behind a curtain of water. Theo tried to lead them back toward the main hallway, but Luis resisted, his face pale. "We have to leave her," Luis said. If we try to carry her, it'll... He stopped himself because finishing the sentence would mean admitting the building was listening. The fluorescent light above them popped with a brittle crack, buzzing like an angry hornet. Shards sprinkled to the tile. Grace flinched. It knows, she whispered. It knows we're next. They hurried deeper into the labyrinth, hoping one door would lead to daylight. But the building was a maze of sterile halls that bent in impossible ways, turning them in loops. Every turn brought the same sound, a faint squeak, like rubber soles dragging against tile just out of sight. Theo spun around crowbar raised, but the hallway was always empty. They stopped at another prep room. Unlike the others, this one had no gurney, no equipment, just walls lined with lockers. Tags still clung to some doors, names half erased. From one locker, a slow tap-tap-tap began, knuckles on steel, deliberate and waiting. Maya tried to steady her voice. Just ignore it. Keep moving. But Grace lowered her mic, drawn like a moth. In her headphones, the tapping multiplied, echoing into dozens of phantom fingers wrapping along every locker door. Theo swore and pulled her back. But as he did, the locker doors shivered tiny metallic rattles building into a chorus. The room erupted in metallic chatter, a sound like 1,000 coins dropped onto concrete. Luis clapped his hands over his ears. "Stop it!" he shouted, but the lockers obeyed no one. Suddenly, one door creaked open. Inside, nothing but folded sheets, yellowed with age. Grace exhaled shakily, but before relief could land, a high-pitched whistle cut through the air, shrill as if forced through a sealed pipe. Her recorder screamed with feedback. She dropped it, covering her ears. The whistle turned into a hush. Shh. The building exhaled a sound colder than any voice commanding silence. Grace's breathing quickened, fogging the mic she had dropped. She bent to pick it up but froze when she saw the sheets inside the open locker move. They twisted, rising, as if filled with invisible lungs. "Don't," Theo warned, but it was too late. The sheets shot outward like serpents winding around Grace's wrists. She screamed, the sound sharp and real, echoing off the tile. Her scream was cut short, abruptly muffled, as one sheet snapped up across her mouth, sealing it tight. The sound collapsed into a strangled gasp. She thrashed, clawing at the linen, but it clung like skin. Maya ran forward, camera slamming against her chest. Theo swung the crowbar, but the steel met only air. The fabric danced away, rewrapping tighter. Luis pulled desperately, but the more he tugged, the more it fused to Grace's skin. Her muffled cries echoed like someone screaming underwater. The recorder on the floor captured only the hollow thud of fists against steel. "Breathe through your nose," Theo shouted, panic cracking his voice. But Grace's nostrils flared, her chest heaved, and even that thin passage seemed to close. The sound of her breath grew frantic, short snorts of air, like a balloon leaking too fast. Maya dropped the camera, trying to peel the sheet away. Her nails scraped fabric that felt both wet and dry, soft and unyielding. The cloth pulsed in rhythm with Grace's heartbeat, each thud louder than the last. Through the silence came the wet pounding of her pulse in her throat, a sound that filled the room like a drumbeat, begging for release. "Cut it! Cut it!" Theo raised the crowbar again, but before he could strike, Grace locked eyes with him. Her pupils were blown wide, terror frozen. She shook her head weakly, as if warning him not to. And then her chest stilled. The room exhaled a long hiss, like air leaking from a punctured lung. The sound rolled across the lockers one by one until each door clicked shut in sequence, clack, clack, clack like applause. Grace fell limp, and the sheets loosening to let her body slump to the floor. The fabric curled back into the locker, folding itself neatly as if nothing had happened. Maya fell to her knees, sobbing silently. Theo dropped the crowbar, his hands trembling. Luis backed into the corner, whispering to himself, "Not me, not me." But the morgue never made promises. From somewhere deeper in the building came a dragging noise, long, gravelly, like something heavy pulled across tile. The sound moved closer with each heartbeat. Maya lifted her camera again, though her tears blurred the lens. She whispered, "We have to keep filming, or no one will believe what it took." Theo looked at Grace's still body, then back at Maya. "Nobody should believe this." His voice cracked, but still he followed when Maya pressed on. Behind them, Grace's recorder still ran. Its waveform displayed a faint, steady whisper, "Shh," repeating endlessly, though no one remained to make the sound. The morgue no longer felt like a building. It felt like a throat, long, wet, and determined to swallow. 3 of them remained: Maya with her camera, Theo with his crowbar, and Luis clutching his torn sleeve. Grace's recorder still hissed faintly from behind them, replaying "shh" in an endless whisper, but they didn't dare go back. The hallway moaned with shifting weight, as though the ceiling beams bent under invisible footsteps. Luis clung to the wall, muttering prayers, his voice cracking. Theo grabbed his shoulder. "Stay with us. We can get out. Follow me." But the hall turned again, narrowing into a chamber that hadn't been there before. The room was bare, no tables, no lockers, just concrete walls that seemed too close, too damp, as if the earth itself had been packed around them. A dull rumble rose beneath their feet, the groan of shifting soil pressing against the foundation. Dust drifted from the ceiling, peppering Maya's lens. She lifted her camera instinctively. "This isn't on any blueprint," she whispered. Theo raised the crowbar. "Nothing in here is supposed to be here." They stepped cautiously inside. The door slammed behind them with a hollow boom, steel on steel. The echo rolled for too long, as though the sound had nowhere to escape. Luis spun and yanked the handle. "It's locked." His voice broke into panic. He slammed his fists against the door. Each hit came back with a deep, muffled thud, like knocking against a coffin lid. Maya filmed tears streaking her cheeks. "Keep calm. Just keep calm." The room trembled again. A crackling roar filled the space gravity grinding waves, shifting like earth collapsing into itself. From the corners, trickles of dust poured down. Theo cursed. "It's closing in." And then it began. The floor itself bulged upward, splitting as if something pushed from below. Concrete cracked, revealing raw soil underneath. The sound was horrible stone tearing against stone, a jagged scream of the building's bones breaking apart. Luis backed into the center of the room. "No, no, no!" His voice shook. From the open cracks came the hiss of shifting sand, the gritty cascade of dirt pouring into the room. Maya's camera caught it all, the soil crawling across the floor like dark water. Theo tried to pull him away, but the ground gave way beneath Luis's feet. He dropped to his knees, legs swallowed to the shin. The grinding of earth grew louder, like dozens of shovels digging at once. Luis screamed, clawing at the floor. Theo grabbed his arms, but the soil clung like quicksand, sucking him deeper. "Pull harder." Maya shouted, her camera trembling. Theo strained veins standing out, but the more he pulled, the heavier Luis became. The sound of rushing dirt filled the room, a choking roar that drowned out their voices. Luis's chest heaved. "Don't let it take me," he sobbed. But the soil climbed higher, gripping his waist, his ribs. The dirt shifted with a rasping hiss like dry lungs inhaling. Maya dropped the camera, trying to help pull. Their hands slipped caked in grit. Luis's face went pale, eyes wide with terror. Then from the walls, slabs of concrete began to slide inward. A grinding screech filled the room like tombstones dragged across stone. The chamber was shrinking. Theo looked around wildly. "It's burying us alive." But the morgue wanted only one. The soil surged upward, wrapping Luis to the chest. He screamed again, but the sound was already muffled by dust filling the air. Coughing, choking his voice, cracked into silence, replaced by the rumble of earth pressing harder. "Luis, breathe, fight it," Maya cried, clawing at the soil, but her hands came away with only dust. The ground gave a final lurch, an awful wet thud, as the soil sealed around him. His eyes bulged in the dim light, one last plea frozen before the dirt closed over his mouth. The sound of suffocation was captured as a faint, desperate rasp, then nothing. The room stilled. The earth flattened itself back into the floor, smooth as if Luis had never stood there. Only a faint mound remained, like the outline of a grave. The silence afterward was deafening, broken only by a single hollow knock from below, one echo that traveled up through the dirt, then vanished. Maya collapsed against the wall, shaking violently. Her camera still rolled where she had dropped it, lens tilted toward the mound. Theo dragged her upright. "We have to go. We're next if we stay." Maya stared at the dirt. It buried him. Right here, in the room. Theo pulled her toward the door. With a sudden creak, the latch clicked open by itself, as though the morgue had finished feeding and was ready to let them move. They stumbled back into the corridor. Behind them, the chamber sealed itself, walls grinding shut until the doorway was gone, leaving only blank concrete. Maya retrieved her camera, holding it close like a talisman. She whispered to herself, 3 gone, 2 left. From somewhere deep inside the morgue came a low, mournful moan, a sound like the earth itself exhaling. The walls trembled with it, vibrating like a heartbeat slowed to a crawl. Theo looked at Maya, his face gray with dust and fear. This place doesn't just kill. It erases. And still they pressed on, because the only way was forward. 2 remained. Maya clutched her camera like a lifeline, her hands raw from gripping it. Theo walked ahead, crowbar still in his fist, though his strength was slipping with every step. The corridor ahead groaned, pipes rattling like bones being shaken in a box. The air felt heavier, thicker, every breath a struggle. Maya whispered, "It won't stop until it has us all." Theo glanced back, his eyes hollow. "Then we make sure it chokes on us." They pushed through another set of doors and found themselves in a stairwell. Rust streaked the walls, and the railing bent like twisted ribs. From below came a faint scraping sound, metal dragging across stone, long and deliberate. Theo gritted his teeth. That's the basement, the final place. Step by step they descended. The lower they went, the colder the air grew. Their footfalls echoed clack, 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 too loud, as if the stairwell itself amplified their doom. At the bottom was a heavy steel hatch, marked with fading letters, Storage B. The paint was flaking, but Maya caught it all on film. When Theo touched the handle, the hatch groaned like a throat swollen with stone. Inside the morgue's hidden underbelly, rows of broken trolleys leaned against the walls. The floor was slick with condensation, the air stinking of rust. And at the far end, a gaping square hole descending into blackness. From the pit rose a steady sound, a slow, sucking inhale, as if the earth itself was breathing through that mouth. Maya lifted her camera. That's it. That's where it wants us. Theo moved forward, crowbar raised. But before he reached the pit, the ground trembled. Chains rattled in the dark, clinking with hollow laughter. Then, without warning, something yanked at his legs. Theo screamed as unseen hands coiled around his ankles. The sound of scraping nails dragged across the floor, pulling him inch by inch toward the pit. He swung the crowbar, wildly, sparks flying as steel struck concrete. "Maya, help me." She lunged, grabbing his arms. For a moment, she held him back, camera dangling from her neck. But the pull was too strong. The floor beneath them echoed with a deep, thunderous pulse like a drumbeat from underground. Theo's grip slipped. His eyes locked on Maya's, wide with terror, but already fading into acceptance. "Run!" he choked out. And then he was gone, dragged screaming into the pit. His cries echoed for a heartbeat, then were silenced by a heavy, wet thud from the darkness. The pit exhaled, long and satisfied. Maya staggered back alone now. Her camera trembled in her hands, capturing only darkness. "It's just me," she whispered. "Just me left." The walls answered with a chorus of metallic knocks, one after another, like coffin lids being sealed. The sound chased her as she fled up the stairs, desperate for any door, any light. She burst into the original corridor. The morgue seemed quiet again, as if nothing had ever happened. Dust floated in the stale air. The trolley sat still. Maya aimed her camera down the hallway, breathing hard. "I'll show the world," she said. "They have to know." And then clang. One steel drawer rattled violently. She turned the camera toward it. Clang! Clang! The drawer shook harder, as if something inside was begging to be let out. The camera zoomed in. Maya's breathing filled the audio. With a deafening bang, the drawer burst open. The steel door slammed against the wall, echoing through the morgue. The camera caught only darkness inside. Then, the screen went black.